Hello, welcome to Unlocking Buddhism. It might sound strange at first, maybe even a little ironic, but in this video, I want to share with you 7 reasons not to follow Buddhism. And I mean that seriously, because sometimes the clearest way to understand a path is by facing the reasons people avoid it. You see, a lot of people feel curious about Buddhism. They hear about mindfulness, compassion, inner peace. They read quotes online or see images of calm monks sitting under trees, and something about it feels peaceful, grounded, true. But then the doubts creep in. In this video, we're going to unpack those doubts, all 7 of them, one by one. And as we go, you might start to see that many of these reasons are actually misunderstandings, and that behind each hesitation, there's often an open door. We're not here to convert you. We're not here to convince you. We're just here to look, gently, honestly, at the things that often push people away from the Buddhist path. And what might happen if we look again, with different eyes. And maybe by the end, you'll discover that the problem wasn't with Buddhism, but with what you thought Buddhism was. So, here's my invitation. If at any moment in this video, something makes you stop, if even one sentence feels like it opened something inside you, just leave one word in the comments. A word that stayed with you, a word that made you breathe differently, a word someone else might need to read. They hear that the Buddha said, "Life is suffering," and that's it. They close the door. After all, who wants to follow a path that sounds so gloomy? But let's pause for a second. What if that's not what he meant? What if it was never about being negative, but about being real? You see, when the Buddha used the word dukkha, he wasn't saying that life is all pain and misery. He was pointing at something more subtle, something we all feel but don't always know how to describe. It's that quiet, gnawing sense that something's not quite right. You get what you want, but soon, it doesn't feel like enough. You try to hold on to what makes you happy, but it changes. People leave, moments pass, health fades. Even joy comes with the shadow of knowing it won't last forever. That's dukkha. It's not dramatic suffering. It's the everyday ache of trying to make things stay the same, in a world that never does. Because if we can learn to see this truth, really see it, we stop fighting life. And in that space, something soft begins to open. Not despair, but clarity. That was just the first truth. He also said, there's a cause for this suffering. There's a way out, and there's a path to freedom. Think of it like going to a wise doctor. Kiao, he tells you what's wrong, and then gives you the prescription. In this analogy, the Buddha is the doctor. His teachings, the Dharma, are the medicine, and the community, the Sangha, is the hospital, full of people healing together. So when someone says Buddhism is pessimistic, maybe they haven't heard the whole story, because underneath that first hard truth is something deeply encouraging, that you can change, that your mind can heal. That real peace, not just pleasure, but peace, is possible, and not someday, not after you've become perfect, but here, now, in the way you breathe, the way you listen, the way you respond instead of react. That's not pessimism, that's liberation. The second one is something I hear often, and maybe you've thought it yourself. I want to understand Buddhism, but it feels so complicated. Too many ideas, too many rules. And you know what? That feeling is completely valid. When you first come into contact with Buddhism, it can feel like you've stepped into a different world. It's not just the language that seems different. It's the way of thinking, the way of looking at life, and that can feel intimidating. But let me offer another perspective. Beneath all of that, beyond the sutras, statues, and chanting bowls, Buddhism is actually trying to do something very simple. It's trying to teach us how to suffer less, not by escaping life, not by becoming someone else, but by understanding how our own minds work. At its core, Buddhism is just a way of seeing, a way of waking up to the present moment, again and again, without being pulled in every direction by fear, desire, or confusion. I once heard a monk say that Buddhism is like a symphony written with only a few notes. You don't need to know every instrument, every movement, every variation. You just need to feel the rhythm. The Buddha's first teaching, the one that began everything, wasn't a long list of rules. It was just 4 truths, 4 observations about life: that there is suffering, that suffering has a cause, that it can end, and that there's a path to ending it. That's it. That's the foundation. Everything else in Buddhism, from meditation techniques to philosophical reflections, is just a way of deepening our understanding of these 4 truths. They're not meant to confuse us. They're meant to bring us back to the center, to help us stop spinning in circles. Think about it like learning to ride a bicycle. At first it feels impossible. You're overthinking every movement. Your balance is off. You fall. You doubt. But after a while, with practice and a few bruises, something clicks. You stop thinking about it. You just ride. The same is true for Buddhist practice. In the beginning, your mind might feel overloaded. There are so many ideas, so many concepts. But over time, if you stay curious and kind with yourself, it all starts to make sense. Not just in your head, but in your heart. You realize that Buddhism isn't asking you to believe in something complicated. It's just asking you to be present, to notice your breath, to watch your thoughts without chasing them, to live gently and see clearly. And here's the beautiful part. You don't need to understand everything to begin. You don't have to be an expert. You just have to start walking, slowly, honestly. So if it ever feels like too much, take a breath. You're not behind. You're not failing. You're exactly where you're meant to be, taking the next small step. And with every step, what once seemed complicated begins to feel like coming home. The third one is a common misconception many people carry, sometimes without even realizing it, is this idea that to truly follow Buddhism, you have to give up everything: your job, your relationships, your possessions, your whole life. They picture monks in robes, living in silence on mountain tops, following strict schedules from dawn to dusk. And while there's something undeniably beautiful about that path, it's not the only one. In fact, it was never meant to be. The Buddha never said that the only way to wake up was to become a monk. He didn't speak only to hermits and renunciants. He spoke to kings, soldiers, mothers, merchants, farmers, people living ordinary lives with ordinary problems, just like us. He understood that transformation isn't about where you live or what you wear. It's about how you live. It's about intention. Becoming a monk is one path, but it's not the only one. And it's not a requirement. You don't need to shave your head or live in a monastery to walk this road. You don't need to abandon your family, your work, or your daily responsibilities. You don't need to change your outer life to begin changing your inner one. There's a name in Buddhism for someone who lives in the world while still walking the path. A lay practitioner. This is someone who wakes up in the morning not to meditate for hours, but to get the kids ready for school. Someone who practices compassion, not in a temple, but at the grocery store. Someone who tries, quietly and sincerely, to bring awareness into the chaos of everyday life. And here's the truth, no one says out loud. That kind of practice is just as powerful, sometimes even more, because it's easy to be peaceful when everything around you is silent. It's harder and braver to be present in the noise, to pause before reacting, to bring mindfulness into the rush, into the mess, into real life. Even many monks will tell you, being a householder, a layperson walking this path, is not the easier option. It requires discipline, honesty, humility, not in theory, but in action, because your life is your temple, your choices, your practice, and your relationships, the training ground for your compassion. I've known lay practitioners who work long hours, who raise children, who take care of aging parents, and still, every day, they come back to the breath, back to awareness, back to kindness. So no, you don't need to become a monk. You don't need to change your whole life overnight. You just need to begin, exactly where you are, with the life you already have. Because Buddhism isn't about escaping the world. It's about seeing it clearly, and choosing again and again to meet it with wisdom and love. The fourth one, you need to meditate all the time. Let's be honest, when people think of Buddhism, the first image that usually comes to mind is someone sitting in perfect stillness. cross-legged, eyes closed, totally calm, and then the doubt shows up. I can't do that. It's a common misunderstanding that to be a real Buddhist, you have to meditate constantly, or that meditation means completely silencing the mind, becoming a statue, or floating in some blissful state of detachment. But Buddhism doesn't demand perfection. It doesn't expect you to drop everything and live like a hermit. In fact, that's not the point at all. The Buddha himself meditated deeply, yes, but that meditation wasn't about escaping the world. It was about understanding it from the inside out. He didn't sit under a tree to run away from pain. He sat because he wanted to face it directly, to observe the mind's habits, the endless grasping, the fear of loss, the craving for control. And in watching all of that, without running, he discovered freedom. But here's the part many people miss. You don't need to meditate all day to walk that same path. You just need to begin with honesty and a little consistency. Meditation isn't a performance. It's not something you succeed at. It's a mirror, a practice of coming back to yourself over and over again. And you don't need a cave or a monastery. You can meditate in a quiet room before the house wakes up, or in the car, just breathing before a stressful meeting. You can meditate in the middle of a hard moment, taking a pause before you say something you'll regret. Meditation is a way of being, not just a technique. It trains you to respond instead of react, to observe instead of getting swept away, to sit with discomfort without immediately trying to fix it or run from it. Yes, it takes time. Yes, it's uncomfortable at first. But just like going to the gym strengthens your body, sitting with your mind, even for 10 minutes a day, begins to change how you see the world and yourself. And what's more, meditation is not the only tool in Buddhism. It's one among many. There's also ethical living, being honest, kind, generous. There's the practice of compassion, helping others, even in small ways. There's mindfulness, paying attention to your actions, your words, your habits. All of these are part of the path. You don't have to master everything at once. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to begin. So the next time someone says, I can't be Buddhist, I don't have time to meditate all the time, you can smile and say, that's okay. He meditated deeply, but he also walked, ate, spoke, and lived with mindfulness. And that's something we can all practice, not in some distant monastery, but right here, in the middle of real life. The fifth reason is subtle idea that floats around, sometimes unspoken, sometimes very direct. Buddhism isn't for people like me. It's a foreign thing. And yes, historically speaking, Buddhism was born in a world very different from ours. Over 2,500 years ago, in the regions we now call India and Nepal, the language was ancient. The culture was different. The people wore robes and walked barefoot. But does that mean it doesn't belong to you? Think about it. Where something begins doesn't define where it belongs. Mathematics started in Babylon. Democracy began in Greece. Jazz was born in the American South. And yet today we all share these things, not because of where they came from, but because of what they offer. The same is true for Buddhism. Yes, it's wrapped in Eastern imagery. Yes, there are rituals, words, and forms that can feel unfamiliar. But at its heart, Buddhism is not about geography. It's about the human experience. It's about suffering and joy, attachment and freedom, mind and awareness. And those things, they don't have a passport. They live in every culture, every country, every person. In fact, one of Buddhism's most beautiful traits is how it adapts. When it went from India to China, it learned to speak Chinese. When it traveled to Japan, it absorbed Japanese aesthetics and sensibilities. When it arrived in Tibet, it took on Tibetan expressions, rituals, colors. And now, in the West, in cities, suburbs, small towns, Buddhism is evolving again, not losing its roots, but growing new branches. You don't have to become Asian to understand the Dharma. You don't need to learn Sanskrit or Pali or chant in a temple. You just need to be human, to breathe, to reflect. If you've ever felt lost in thought or overwhelmed by emotions, or trapped in patterns that don't serve you, you've already touched the questions Buddhism is trying to answer. It's a mirror, and wherever you are, whatever your background, You are already standing in front of it. The only question is whether you're ready to look inside. And when someone says that, it's not usually coming from logic, it's coming from the heart. Because for many of us, religion isn't just about beliefs, it's about identity. It's where we come from. It's our family, our childhood, the holidays we remember, the prayers we were taught. It's our grandmother's voice, our father's example, the rhythm of something sacred that has always been part of us. And so the idea of trying something like Buddhism can feel like disloyalty, as if we're turning our back on something holy, or betraying the people who taught us to believe in the first place. But what if that's not what's happening? What if exploring Buddhism doesn't mean replacing anything, but simply deepening your understanding of what already matters to you? The Buddha wasn't trying to build an empire of believers. He wasn't a salesman. He wasn't asking for allegiance. He was simply pointing at the human mind and saying, "Here, look, watch closely." That's not a religion in the competitive sense. It's a method, a way of becoming more present, more awake, more at peace with the life you already live. You don't need to abandon your God to sit quietly with your breath. You don't need to erase your scriptures to reflect on impermanence. You don't need to deny your faith to practice compassion. In fact, for many people, Buddhist principles support their spiritual life. They don't take anything away. They just help clear the noise. A Christian who learns to meditate might find new depth in the words of Jesus. A Muslim who practices mindfulness might feel more connected during prayer. A Jewish practitioner might explore the Buddhist view of suffering and find it echoes wisdom from their own tradition. And that's the beauty of it. Buddhism doesn't ask for exclusivity. It doesn't need you to belong to it. It's not a club, it's a mirror, one you can hold beside your own beliefs to see more clearly what's already there. If anything, Buddhism invites humility. It says, don't follow blindly, don't reject blindly. Look, live, and if something doesn't resonate, let it go. Buddhism will still be here, quietly, gently, asking nothing of you. You don't have to give up your rituals. You don't have to reject your roots. You don't have to stop calling on whatever name gives you comfort in the night. You can keep your prayers, you can keep your questions, you can keep your faith, and still, sit with your breath, listen to your mind, be present with your pain. Because the truth is, Buddhism isn't trying to win your loyalty. It's simply offering tools that help you see the world more clearly, and maybe suffer a little less while doing so. And isn't that what every sacred path hopes for? The seventh reason is perhaps the most common of all. There's one doubt that doesn't always get said out loud, but it lives quietly inside so many of us. It's the silent feeling that maybe this path is too hard for someone like me, that you're too restless, too distracted, too broken, too late. And if that's ever crossed your mind, I want you to know, you're not alone. Everyone who's ever started this path has felt that way. Even the monks, even the teachers, even the Buddha in the beginning doubted whether awakening was possible. This path wasn't made for saints. It was made for human beings, just like you. The ones who get angry sometimes, the ones who procrastinate, the ones who've made mistakes they still carry quietly in their chest, the ones who feel overwhelmed before they even begin. You don't need to be calm to meditate. You don't need to be wise to listen. You don't need to be pure to walk this road. You just need one thing, a little bit of willingness. Willingness to pause, to breathe, to notice what's happening inside you, even if it's messy or uncomfortable. Because that moment, the moment you stop running and start paying attention, that's the real beginning of the path. And the truth is, you can do it. Not all at once, not perfectly, but slowly, patiently, honestly. Maybe you'll forget to practice for a week. Maybe you'll sit in silence and feel nothing but frustration. Maybe you'll snap at someone right after reading a chapter about compassion. That's okay. Each time, you simply begin again. And beginning again is the practice. This is not about reaching some finish line. It's about walking with presence. It's about noticing how you relate to your life, your thoughts, your habits, and gently shifting the way you meet them. The beauty of the Buddhist path is that it grows with you. You don't have to be a different person to start. You don't have to fix yourself first. You begin with who you are, and over time, what feels impossible begins to soften. The mind becomes less chaotic. The heart becomes less heavy. And one day you notice you're not the same. Not because you tried to be perfect, but because you stayed with yourself long enough to change. So if you've ever thought, I don't think I can do this, let me gently say, you already are. Every doubt you've faced, every moment you've paused, every time you've questioned everything and still kept going. That's what walking the path looks like. And maybe that's all Buddhism ever asked of you. Not perfection, not achievement, just the courage to show up. So now we've walked through 7 doubts, 7 hesitations, each one real, each one human. Maybe you recognize some of them in yourself. Maybe you've carried those questions quietly for a long time. And yet, here you are, still listening, still reflecting. That says something. It tells me this path isn't foreign to you. It's familiar in a way that goes deeper than words. Because the truth is, Buddhism isn't trying to make you into something new. It's helping you remember something ancient, something already within you. It's not about becoming a Buddhist. It's about becoming awake. It doesn't demand blind belief. It doesn't require you to renounce your background, your name, or your story. It simply asks for your attention. It invites you to look, to sit with what is, to meet each moment with curiosity instead of resistance. There's no finish line here, no badge of achievement, just the next breath, the next step, the next choice to be a little more aware, a little more kind, a little more present than you were yesterday. It's something you live into, quietly, gently, every time you choose to stay with what's real. So if this conversation stirred something in you, even a small shift, a breath of clarity, a moment of pause, then maybe you're already on the path. Maybe you always were. And from here, you just keep going, not because you're certain, but because you're willing. And that, truly, is enough. Now, if you feel like sharing, just leave one word in the comments. A word that stayed with you, something that opened, something that softened. Your single word might be the lantern someone else needs. Thank you for being here. Thank you for listening. And above all, keep walking. We're all on this road together.